Hi guys, welcome back. First of all, I want to apologize for my silence. I've just been really overwhelmed with work and haven't had the time to dedicate myself to doing the reviews, at least in the way that I like to do. I'm going to try and bring you a few reviews over the next couple of days to kind of make up for some of them which are going to maybe come across a little bit delayed. But anyway, let's jump into this. What you want to know is, what do I have to say about the following IMs that I will be reviewing, and that's that. The first one I'm gonna review and talk to you guys about is the KiwiEars, the Airoso. Airoso means airy, and definitely that's the vibe that you get when you're listening to the KiwiEars. You definitely get a sound which is very airy, very detailed, very spacious. Whether or not that spaciousness is realistic or is maybe a little bit colored and pushed is a different story altogether. The reality is, KiwiEars once again hasn't disappointed me for sure. Their last couple of IMs have been really impressive. The Ether, their planar was absolutely phenomenal in my opinion. Definitely one of the best planar IMs out there. Another one which I thoroughly enjoyed was the KE4. Okay, it has that meta type style tuning, but I think the KE4 is a phenomenal IM, honestly. And then as well the Kanta, the one with the micro planers, also another impressive IM. As you guys probably will know, KiwiEars started off relatively slowly with an IM which was the Cadenza, which was the single DD, which in my opinion still by today's standards holds its own. It's a really well tuned single DD. And even today at its $34 price, you could argue that maybe okay, you can get a similar sound slightly cheaper, but the reality is it is a very good sounding IM. It's well built, it sounds great, and it can hold its own against the majority, or if not all, of the single DDs that are out there in its price tag and slightly above. Anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about the KE, the Airoso. The Airoso is a OnePlus 4. It costs $129, so in terms of price, KiwiEars has been once again very intelligent. They've priced it competitively compared to some of the other OnePlus 4s out there, stuff like the Puller PA02, the D41 from Audio CKLVX, the Tens Chimkara. It's below them. The closest IM in terms of price to the Airoso will be the Truth Years, the Nova, which I've got here, and I've also chosen the Zigat, the Estrella, the collaboration with J Audio, which okay is significantly more expensive. It's twice the price, but I selected that and the Truth Years because they all share a very common style of sound. Perhaps the one that might be a little bit less in one department is the Nova, but they all have a similar style of tuning, which is that gliding style of bass. Bass is definitely well implemented and well done. That's not an issue in any one of them. The Nova is the one that perhaps comes across a little bit leaner as compared to the Airoso and the Estrella. But the Airoso and the Estrella, they are very similar. I mean, when I show you the graphs, you'll see for yourselves. But the difference that exists, especially up to about 3K, is almost non-existent, and then above that there is a little bit of a difference which on paper benefits or apparently benefits the Airoso, but in reality it doesn't. They come across equally detailed with loads of detail up top, loads of twinklies and sparklies. The difference here that I think exists and can to a certain extent justify the Estrella is that area which is then different, which is from around 5.5K to just over 10K, where you do see more energy, at least on paper here, although audibly you don't then notice that energy. But you know, audibly on paper, sorry, on paper you see the Airoso being more energetic in that 5.56K to 10K area than the Australia, but the Australia does that area in a more polished manner, and you will notice it on some songs. I mean, stuff like Hello from Adele, or Shelter by Leaves, or two songs where you notice that there's that extra polish on the Australia side as compared to the Airoso. Whether or not that then now justifies twice the amount of money is something which I'll leave to you guys. As for the rest, and let's go now by parts. Bass, like I said, on the Airoso is phenomenal. I really and honestly cannot fault it for various reasons, and if not the main one being obviously the price. The bass is controlled, it goes deep, loads of sub bass, a good transition from the sub bass into the mid bass, and then into the mids, so it doesn't you know, overpower the mid range. vocals are clean, and like I said, in these two songs they are, you know, phenomenally well done, the vocals. There's detail, plenty of detail. It's just that in that upper register of the treble where you notice that the Airoso is just a little bit rough around the edges. It's nothing which is, you know, a deal breaker, and when compared to IEMs at its price point, you know, not compared to something so much more expensive than the Australia is, it holds its own, and it's probably the better one. One of the IEMs that, for example, comes to mind is the D41 for my audio and the Puller, the PA02, which do have again a type of sound which is very similar here to the Airoso. I didn't include them here, although I did listen and did compare, just because I thought I didn't want to over complicate the review here. But what I can say is that the Puller PA02, sorry, my apologies, the D41 from CKL-VX Mayor Audio, and the Airoso, they are three IMs which all could perhaps have their main fault being that the treble is a little bit rough around the edges in certain passages, certain songs. Other than that, you know, you can't really fault them. And already when the D41 came out and the Puller PA02 came out, I said, and I was one of the few people that really enjoyed them. I mean, there is very little that you could actually point as a negative aspect for those two. I am especially considering again their price tag, where the Puller was the cheaper one. You could get the Puller at some point in time. You could get the Puller from HIFIGO at $139, which was pretty good. The D41 is a little bit more, but anyway, they all centered themselves in that $130 to $160 price range, and that also does what those two do, but in my opinion, even a little bit better. There's a little bit more detail or polish in that detail. Although, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, you know, when I compare it to more expensive 1+4s, then you do notice that things are just a little bit rough around the edges, as compared to, for example, the Nova. I would say that, yes, the Nova is maybe a little bit more polished in that particular part of the spectrum that we're talking about, where you notice that, there's that energy which on certain songs can maybe be a little bit excessive for some of us. Yes, the Nova does have that area around 3K just a little bit more emphasized, which gives a little bit extra forwardness, but nothing which is really, again, a major difference to the Airoso. Where the Nova loses out to the Airoso, in my opinion, is in the bass in terms of the overall quantity. The quality is very much, it's very identical. They're very matched in terms of the quality. But you do notice that the Airoso does have a little bit more heft, a little bit more weight into the bass. And that obviously then does make it significantly more fun to listen to with certain genres of music. while the Nova, with those specific genres, can sound a little bit more sterile. So with EDM or with songs which are a little bit more bass heavy, the Nova can maybe sound sterile or a little bit thin, while or overly clinic, while the Airoso always has, in my opinion, enough energy to give them all their let's say their correct vibe. Okay. As compared to the Estrella, again, in terms of the bass and the mids, they're very identical. It's just that extra polish in the Australia, which does confer it an advantage, and then obviously it's then the price. In terms of its technicalities and detailed retrieval, soundstage, imaging, timbre and tonality. How do I place, or what do I have to say about the Airoso in those departments? Soundstage, yes, plenty of air, plenty of space. On occasion, that air, that sensation of space can come across a little bit fake. I'm not going to deny it, which, mind you, is the same situation as well in the Australia. Sometimes in the Australia, that sensation of space is just a little bit more forced. But it's like I've said countless times before, I don't mind it when overall everything has been so well done. And ultimately, this is about the music. It's about being fun. It's about you enjoying what you're listening to. And if you want to just look at the technical aspects and everything has to be spick and span, and then if you let's say your OCD take over, then it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be about listening to the music. Imaging, nothing to complain about there as well. In terms of the detail retrieval, perfect, loads of twinklies and sparklies. The timbre and tonality is, for the most part, correct, although, again, that coloredness that it sometimes has can maybe make things sound just a little bit overly emphasized. I mean, maybe the cymbals are a little bit too lively at times, maybe guitar plucks are a little bit too plucky, if that's even a word that I can use. But I think I'm conveying a general idea which you guys will mostly understand. Overall, what I can say is that the Airoso is a really well done, really well built IM. Obviously I'm not using here the stock cable. The stock cable, it's not where KiwiEars spent money. The tips, I'm not also using the stock tips. I'm using some KiwiEars 7 tips. The case is fine, it's nothing special. It's fine. It fits this IVipQ cable in there, so I'm happy with that. I think the money was spent where it matters, which is in the build quality. So it's solidly built. It looks decent, it looks nice. It's not the prettiest of IEMs, I will say, but it's also not the ugliest of IEMs. Okay, nothing wrong there. Taste is subjective. But where mostly it is important that it performs, which is in the sound and whether it's fun or not, and it does what it's supposed to do properly. That, or all the boxes have been ticked, in my opinion. So I would definitely say have a listen to it if you can. If you live in a part of the world where you have access to the IEM and you can listen to it, definitely go for it. If you think you like something like the Australia, but you cannot afford the Australia, I think the Airoso will definitely be a very solid option. I would take the Airoso over the D41 and, for example, the Puller, if that is also some help. And you guys know, those that have been following me for a while know that I like the D41 and I like the Puller, the PA02. They are basically identical to each other. So I would take that. I would take this over those two. The SL41, the Mark II version, I think there's enough differences there to justify them as such grades to each other. So the Mayer Audio, the SL41 Mark II, it's got the tuck style bass and also has a different way of doing things up top. So I would say that is a side grade to this. As for the Nova, if you like the Nova but you want something which is also detailed up top, it's got loads of technical prowess up top, but it's got a little bit more bass just to give things a little bit more of life, I definitely think the Airoso is something worth considering, because it's like I said, this costs very similar. It has a very similar value in terms of price to the Nova. It's very similar overall in terms of its sound, and only in genres which are a little bit more bass heavy will you then see that the Airoso outperforms it. So if you like the Nova, I'm sure that this will definitely satisfy you. All right. Anyway, guys. I'll be putting all the graphs together afterwards in a separate video, so you guys can afterwards have a look. But what I can say is that you will be very surprised that these three graphs surprisingly similar. Although yes, there are slight differences here and there that with very special attention, and you will pick up on them. But you'd be surprised. Anyway, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions, please feel free to ask me. All right, you take care now.